Welcome to Eka Software, where we bring you the authentic stories of courage, strategy, and the turning points that shaped history. 6 months after the shock of Pearl Harbor, in June 1942, the Empire of Japan seemed unstoppable, dominating the vast Pacific. Admiral Yamamoto, the mastermind behind the Pearl Harbor attack, hatched a new, audacious plan, Operation Me. His target was the tiny Midway Atoll, a speck of land 1,300 miles northwest of Hawaii. The goal, to lure and annihilate the remaining U.S. aircraft carriers that had escaped the December 7th raid. Yamamoto assembled the world's largest naval armada, the Combined Fleet. At its heart was Vice Admiral Kiichi Nagumo's first carrier striking force, the Codebreakers, for elite fleet carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu bristling with 248 aircraft, and supported by a massive contingent of battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. Yamamoto's objective was clear: extend Japan's defensive perimeter and crush American naval power once and for all. But unknown to the Japanese, a small team of American codebreakers at Station Hypo in Pearl Harbor had achieved the impossible. Commander Joseph Rockefort and his team had cracked Japan's JN-25 naval code. They knew the cryptic designation AF meant Midway. Armed with this crucial intelligence, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, knew Yamamoto's entire plan. He laid a trap. Nimitz positioned his 3 carriers Enterprise and Hornet under the command of Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance, and the battle-scarred Yorktown under Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, who held overall tactical command to the northeast of Midway, lying in wait. The stage was set for the greatest carrier battle in history. Yamamoto, confident in his plan's secrecy, made a critical error. He split his massive fleet. His main body, including the super battleship Yamato, sailed far behind Nagumo's carriers, while a diversionary force attacked the Aleutian Islands, hoping to draw American ships north. It was Nagumo's Codebreakers that would lead the charge. On June 3rd, Japanese planes bombed Midway's defenses. Runways were cratered, but the dug-in U.S. Marines fought back fiercely with anti-aircraft fire and fighters, limiting the damage. In return, American land-based bombers from Midway launched ineffective attacks on the Japanese transport fleet hundreds of miles away. The opening moves were indecisive. The real battle began before dawn on June 4th. At 4:30 a.m., Nagumo launched his first wave. 108 planes roared off the decks, a mix of fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo bombers, tasked with obliterating Midway's air power. By 6 a.m., U.S. radar on the atoll picked up the incoming raid. Midway scrambled everything it had. Marine pilots in their outdated F-to-F Buffaloes and more capable F-4F Wildcats flew into a wall of steel, outnumbered 4-1. They fought with incredible bravery, inflicting some losses but suffering terribly in return. The Japanese bombers struck the island's facilities hard, but they failed to knock out Midway's airfields completely. Meanwhile, the American carriers had launched their search planes. At 7 a.m., a PBY Catalina patrol bomber radioed the electrifying message: main body of carriers sighted. Fletcher immediately ordered a full-scale strike from all 3 of his carriers. 117 planes, slow TBD Devastator torpedo bombers, deadly SBD Dauntless dive bombers, and F-4F Wildcat fighters began launching. But in the haste of battle, coordination faltered. The torpedo squadrons, critically, launched without their fighter escorts. Aboard his flagship Akagi, Admiral Nagumo now faced a critical dilemma. His first strike wave was returning, low on fuel and needing to rearm. Just then, a scout plane reported sighting U.S. warships. Nagumo made a fateful decision. He ordered his crews to rearm the waiting planes with torpedoes for an anti-ship strike. But minutes later, another report came in, this one about planes from Midway. Believing he needed to neutralize the island first, Nagumo reversed his order, demanding the planes be switched back to land attack bombs. His carrier decks became a chaotic mess of discarded torpedoes, high-explosive bombs, and exhausted ground crews working frantically. This indecision, this moment of hesitation, would seal his fate. Between 8:30 and 9:30 a.m., the American torpedo bombers arrived over the Japanese fleet. They came in alone, without fighter protection. Hornet's Torpedo Squadron 8, led by Lieutenant Commander John Waldron, attacked first. Flying low and slow, they were mercilessly torn apart by Japanese Zero fighters and a storm of anti-aircraft fire. All 15 of their Devastator bombers were shot down. Only one man, Ensign George Gay, survived, clinging to a seat cushion in the water, a lone witness to the carnage. The torpedo squadrons from Enterprise and Yorktown suffered a similar, horrific fate. Over 40 American torpedo planes were lost for almost no hits. The Japanese carriers seemed invincible, but their sacrifice was not in vain. The relentless, suicidal attacks of the torpedo bombers had pulled the Japanese combat air patrol down to sea level, leaving the skies above the carriers wide open. Then, at 10:22 a.m., came what history would call the miracle 5 minutes. High above, Lieutenant Commander Wade McClusky's dive bombers from the Enterprise were running low on fuel, having missed their initial intercept point. On the verge of turning back, McClusky spotted the wake of a lone Japanese destroyer, the Arashi, racing to rejoin the fleet. He decided to follow it. It was a gamble that changed the world. McClusky SSBD Dauntlesses arrived directly over Nagumo's carriers just as the last of the torpedo attacks was ending. They tipped over into their dives, unopposed. McClusky's group targeted the Kaga and the flagship Akagi. Lieutenant Richard Best's bomb struck Akagi's flight deck, igniting the planes and ordnance crowded below. A chain reaction of explosions tore the ship apart. Kaga was ravaged by multiple direct hits, turning her into a floating inferno. At the exact same moment, Yorktown's dive bombers, led by Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie, found the carrier Soryu. 3 bombs slammed into her deck, and within minutes, she too was doomed. In less than 5 minutes, 3 of Japan's finest aircraft carriers Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu were burning wrecks. Hundreds of Japan's most experienced and irreplaceable pilots were gone. The tide of the Pacific War had turned in a flash of smoke and fire. But the battle wasn't over. The 4th Japanese carrier, Hiryu, had escaped the initial onslaught. Her commander launched a furious counterattacks. Her planes found the USS Yorktown, hitting her with bombs and torpedoes, leaving her dead in the water and forcing her crew to abandon ship. But Hiryu's triumph was short-lived. At 5 p.m., American dive bombers, this time from the Enterprise, found the last Japanese carrier. Lieutenant Richard Best, the same pilot who had hit Akagi, scored another fatal blow on Hiryu. Fires raged out of control, and she was scuttled the next day. All 4 of Nagumo's carriers were at the bottom of the sea. The cost was high on both sides. The United States lost the Yorktown, which was finally sunk by a Japanese submarine while under tow, along with the destroyer Hammond, 145 aircraft, and about 300 men, but Japan's losses were catastrophic. Nearly 3,057 men were killed, 248 aircraft were destroyed, and worst of all, their elite, veteran carrier air groups were shattered, a blow from which the Imperial Japanese Navy would never recover. Why did Yamamoto's masterful plan fail so completely? American code breaking gave Admiral Nimitz the ultimate advantage. Foreknowledge. He knew where and when to set his ambush. Nagumo's hesitation, coupled with Japan's rigid doctrine and poor reconnaissance, doomed the Kido Butai. On the American side, Admiral Spruance's cautious yet decisive leadership preserved his carriers, while Fletcher effectively coordinated the attack despite losing his own flagship. Midway halted Japanese expansion in its tracks. The initiative in the Pacific shifted permanently to the United States, paving the way for the brutal but victorious island-hopping campaign, starting with Guadalcanal. As Yamamoto himself would later reflect, we won a great tactical victory at Pearl Harbor, but in doing so, we awakened a sleeping giant and filled him with a terrible resolve. The Battle of Midway was that resolve made manifest. This echo of war resounds with a clear message: intelligence, courage, and timing, not just luck, are what turned the tide of battle. It was a victory forged by the heroism of men like Wade McClusky, who gambled on a hunch and found an empire's fleet; John Waldron, who led his squadron into certain death to create an opening; and Richard Best, who delivered the fatal blows. From the brink of defeat to a decisive victory, Midway was where hubris met resolve in the vast Pacific skies. Thanks for joining us on Eckersoft War. If you found this story compelling, please like, share, and subscribe. Next time, we dive into the grueling Guadalcanal campaign. Let us know in the comments which Pacific battle you'd like to see covered next. Thanks for watching.